I visit a lot of food banks, I'm sure you have. There's a space that people seem to want to just go in and out of. They're not a place, when we were speaking the other day, I learned the term bumping places. They're not a place where people mingle and rub elbows and get together. And it's often a place where the middle class hands food to the low income. And there's not a merging of those worlds at all, it's just a transaction. So, from reading your book, it sounds like space is the place to start. Is that a fair comment?
Are you a jazz connoisseur? You know, Sun Ra, space is the place. That was my dad's group in 1970. Space, yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing we wanted to change at the stop was that feeling that you had to check your humanity at the door before you came in. It was difficult for me to work in those kinds of conditions, and well, I can't imagine for a minute what it would have been like for someone who is quite desperate, because that's when you go to a food bank, is when your fridge is run dry. So, yeah, I don't know what to say. I've traveled a lot over the last little bit, and our sector in many ways is on its knees. Our space is completely inadequate. I've visited too many strip mall plazas with fluorescent lights and barely a photocopier, basements here and there, and I don't think you can create change when people are forced through that kind of gauntlet. And space costs money too, so I'm not suggesting it's an easy thing to solve. But to me, it's a cornerstone of how you create, again, these words of generosity and connection and dignity. I've always said that there are two key ingredients to individual and community change, and they're hope and self-worth. And if you don't have those two ingredients, you're not going to get off the couch. And space contributes to that sense of hope and self-worth.
And I guess reading the book, and I guess going back and you and Andrea writing your life, was a surprise. Was the journey, could you have imagined where you were going to end up?
No way.
And I guess I've heard from other people who are involved in this is that they've told me reading your book gives them hope, because they found someone like you who seems at this end point, or a good point in his journey, that you walked into this from a background that wasn't food banks, it wasn't any of the things that you've come to be known for. So I've heard a lot of people say they get inspiration knowing you kind of stumbled into it and through it for a bit. Is that fair?
Well, I certainly am a better cook now. I'm a better gardener. I'm a better all those things. But I didn't know a lot about food. But I should say that I've worked for many years organizing tenants in public housing and working with homeless men on the east side of Toronto, helping them to transition out of the Don Valley into transitional housing and then into permanent housing. So I had a lot of history working in low-income neighborhoods. But when I took the job, I knew very little about food banking or food. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that the conditions that we were working in, they just weren't okay. They weren't acceptable. And people ask, how did the journey start? And the journey started like it. I want to be careful. There are lots of people who are doing really impressive work in pretty difficult circumstances with not a lot of money. But we started by simply asking our neighborhood what they wanted. And I'm always shocked at how few community organizations ask the people who walk in their doors what they need. And, I'm not saying they all jumped up and said, I want to be a cook, a gardener, a volunteer, a engaged citizen. I'm not saying that, but, we were about food. We had a clothing bank that just drove us bananas. And we got rid of that as soon as possible. Because we really wanted to focus on good, healthy food. So you got to say no to things to say yes to other things. I don't know, maybe it's self-evident, but I think in our sector we get so I'm sorry, this is a bit of inside baseball. I don't know how many people are kind of working in the NGO sector, but it's easy to get your tail wagged when a funder comes along and says, hey, could you do this? And you end up doing these crazy gymnastics to do something that takes you way away from what you're about. So we started by listening, and then we developed a plan, and we were ruthless in sticking to that plan. And lo and behold, when you tell a new narrative around food, community, and the power of food, people are attracted to that. People are tired of the handout and the fact that if you're poor, you live in a neighborhood where poor health exists. And so when we started to tell a different story, and it was relentless incrementalism. Like, I'm a revolutionary, I hope you think I'm a bit of a revolutionary, but this was all relentless incrementalism over many years. Like building, can we fix the bathrooms? Yeah, that would be great, because someone shouldn't go to the bathroom and then walk out into the middle of the 40 people. Like, that's not very respectful. So, these things were hard won over many years, but listen, create a plan, and then just go like stick on it. Like proselytize. Two people's meeting, this is awesome. But I used to go to meetings where it's like, hey, how's it going? You never know. It might have been a donor or someone who needed your services. So you just got to be out there.
So without ego, does it take 1, 2 people? It seems obvious, and when you tell the story, you think, yeah, why don't we do it differently? But you and the people in the book did do it differently. Was it just a perfect storm of a moment and people's energies, or is it possible anywhere?
Absolutely. The thing that we're trying to do, and I think if you take the constituent parts of the Community Food Center, there's nothing terribly unique about it. There are lots of organizations that garden. There are lots of organizations that cook together. There are lots of organizations that do advocacy. What we tried to do is meld them all together in a place-based setting with very strong metrics and evaluation systems, which I don't think we want to get into tonight, but saying that if we're putting inputs into this community, we want to be showing that we're making a difference. So we kind of put that together into one thing, and we are basically going out to the world to say that for $500,000, we can create a mini stop. And $500,000 gets you 5 staffs and programming money, and that does include capital costs to try and improve your space. But I know lots of Bay Street lawyers who make $500,000 a year, and we should, I was going to say by God again, I gotta be careful here. But by God, we should be able to find funding like that to create these centers where people can find their voices and be met where they're at, and then start to change their lives and the life of the community. It's not a lot of money. And in our sector, we're used to crumbs. It's crazy. Like, I was in Halifax, sorry, can I riff on this?
Right.
So I was in Halifax, and I asked someone, I said, well, what's a big donation? Even though I think, our tax dollars should be playing a very important role in this, but before we build that steam into our tax dollars, the private sector, private philanthropy, a hybrid of raising funds is really important. We're not going to go into how you fundraise, but I asked someone, I said, what's a big gift in Halifax? And the person turned to me, well, for Dalhousie, it's $5 million. And for our community kitchen, it's $2,500. I was like, that's absurd. Ask for $5 million and throw in a couple kitchens and whatever else you need. But my point is that it's as easy to think big as it is to think small. So think big. You want to change things, so don't beggar yourself. Anyway.
Yeah,
I know I got on a roll.
Yeah. You're right. I think we're all used to, when I was at Everdale when I first started, the big donation was $5,000, and I see the amazing things that happen there. It's so little. I think investing in these projects, the return on investment is ridiculous. $1 would get you 10 back, right? But reading your book, I didn't read anywhere that the city of Toronto helped. I didn't really hear that the provincial government, the federal government, where are they? Where have they gone? Why aren't they part of this? Why is it you knocking on doors everywhere? Why aren't we, when we're spending $13 billion on diabetes at the back end, why aren't we spending $500,000 on the front end? It seems ridiculous.
This is a bigger conversation about our political culture. 4 or 5 year terms for government. It's just like, all right, what's the public opinion poll say, Larry? And Larry says, oh, you got to go this way. You go that way. And I think that that's a serious problem because no one sees preventatively or 15, 20 years out there. In our health dollars, we spend less than 1% on prevention. All of it goes to the other stuff. So I think that that is a problem. But I'm very hopeful, and I hope when people read the book that it is a hopeful book, that change can happen. And my comment about change happens because you fight for it. And I'm a big believer that in the arc of history, we're at a moment where the costs of doing nothing are very significant. So these seemingly intractable problems, if you take healthcare alone, 50 cents of every dollar in every province in this country is spent on healthcare. The biggest chunk of that is on diet-related illness. So that is a juggernaut that's coming at us. And sometime there's going to be a break where we have to start driving money into upstream programming. If you take environmental issues and the good work of Farmstart and Everdale and others, 30% of greenhouse gases and pollution is connected to the way we move food from field to table. That's serious. And so people like Brian Gilbasey, and we're talking about ALICE, Alternative Land Use Services, and carbon sequestration, and the farmer's role in stewardship environmentally, those are really important voices that are growing. And I think, and in that vein, we should not be scared of making the case that our interventions are having a significant impact. And that means measuring and evaluation. A lot of people are scared of those words. And I think, if you're running a program where 6 people are coming to your community kitchen and they come for a year, that's not good enough. Like, you have to create really good programs that people start here and you're helping them move along in whatever way you name or they name with you. And there's a lot of really bad programming out there. Like, you talk to funders, and I'm being really straight here. Like, there are a lot of funders who are desperate for good programs. They don't want to be embarrassed. They want to make sure that their money is doing good things. So there are a lot of, have you guys ever heard of Zellers? Like, there's no more Zellers. And we have a lot of nonprofits that just barely hang on, that quite frankly should maybe be hanging on. They should be amalgamated, or maybe they've done their time and move on. And so that's tough to hear. But if you're going to do programming in communities, particularly around with low-income community members, you better deliver. Like, there's a lot of pressure on you. So 6 people eating a grape in the corner, not helpful. It's not helpful. You have to create really good programs. Measure them. Make a difference.
Okay, I think we're going to go to the audience, but I'll ask you one last question. There's so much going on, income inequality, there's so many reasons there's problems. But it sounds like to me, and what I've seen and what your book tells us, which is very hopeful, it tells a fabulous message, thank you. Is it really just people sharing a good meal together? Is that where change starts? Is it as simple as that?
Well, it's more complicated, but I'll say that never underestimate the power of a great meal cooked with love and eat with others. Like, there's something to be said for that. And a lot of people's journey at the stop starts with a beautiful meal. That when someone looks at the meal and eats it, they feel, wow, someone has taken a lot of care with this meal. And through that, they feel that they matter too. And that gets back to that point about hope and self-worth. So, food is really powerful. And the problem is that you can't end there. And I'm a big believer that you have to politicize these conversations. And nonprofits are terrified of politics. Oh my gosh.
Well, and you're mandated not to.
Well, there's what this is it.
Laws,
There's this thing called the CRA law, right? That defines how much advocacy you can do. But I've found in all the years that I've worked in the sector, 20 some odd years, that as long as you're not partisan or stridently stupid, like, burning down an MP's office or something, like, you actually are talking about what makes a healthy neighborhood. And that's the work that we're doing. And when you start to name those things, and you start to name the things that need to change in your community, and you simply go, how many here have been to visit their MPP? Yeah, not many. Like, it's hard to engage in the political process. It's even tougher to get low-income folks who are spending their entire day trying to figure out how to put food on the table and put their lives together. But, I think generally as a society, we have to be more politicized. And I don't mean ideological. Like, you can be an NDP or a liberal or I don't care. But it's about what makes a safe, inclusive, sustainable community. You just drive on those themes and you make some noise. Like, the weekend wasn't given to workers. The weekend was fought for and won. So if we're going to fight for a different kind of food system, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and move beyond just a beautiful meal. But that's where you're meeting people where they're at. But then saying, wait a minute, we need our healthcare dollars supporting this. Or we need to increase social assistance. Right? There are a myriad of things that need to change. Because ultimately, our work is about trying to get into the slipstream of tax dollars. That's where big societal change can happen. If you can make the case that your work you're doing on the ground is going to have a societal impact, that's when dollars start to roll. And that's the fight we're on with community food centers now.
That's awesome. Andrew? Yeah, so I'll flip the book one more time. You push a button on it, I think? Could you go over this end? Other end, right? I thought you'd be more tech savvy. But I will say, again, the book's awesome, and I think what these books do and what Nick does in talking is he's given a bit of a shortcut how to get there. Right? When I was with Everdale, it's like we made all the mistakes in the world. We fought our way up and down through crazy paths, and we got to a pretty interesting place. And when you can share that story, so you're not starting at square one if you're a new group, right? You've built on the legacy here, and then I'm sure you found the programs go somewhere wholly new place, like Stratford, Perth, the places they are. Like they're pulling new parts into this that you might not have ever imagined.
We have a question.
That's true. All right. Let's go to the crowd.
Hi Nick, I'm Erin Harvey from Family and Children's Services and the Guelph Neighborhood Support Coalition. And I'm just wondering, you've talked a bit about funding, you've talked about the public sector and the private sector, and also your struggles with, at that conference you went to, with the private sector and how this isn't on the radar. So how do you wrestle with some of those issues in terms of getting the resources you need to make this kind of thing happen, in deciding, I guess, one, where are the funds available, who are the best funders to fund this kind of thing, and given that I'm trying to be brief, given that it's the capitalist system that has put us in this bit to begin with. So by allowing or looking to the private sector, on one hand, they're part of the solution, and impact investing can be really a wonderful thing, but on the other hand, aren't they also the cause of the problem? Because really, the public sector should be really carrying the weight of this, the weight of funding this. I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on that. I don't think there's a clear answer, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there's no one silver bullet to this, and I believe in a mixed economy on the fundraising front. So you never want to have your eggs in any one basket, or else you're going to get smoked, right? You have to really be thinking around, so conventionally speaking, within the sector, it's about, you might do an event, you might have a direct mail campaign, you might have a number of private foundations that are supporting you. You might find some progressive corporations, and I think there are some, and I think that's important. There is, as consumers push on the food file, we're creating more and more companies that are thinking about a different bottom line than just the bottom line. And that's a reality. They need to make money, but there are some good companies that are thinking clearly about the environment, fair wages, etc. And you want to search those out and find them early because you want to grow with them. And then there's government. I mean, but it comes down to the three things I've already talked about. You listen, you develop a good plan, and you're relentless on telling everyone, including your grandma, that this is changing the world. And if you measure it, and you show that it's moving the dial on issues of poverty, poor health, or whatever outputs you need, goals you need, then people are attracted to good ideas. And in a way, Community Food Centers Canada is about becoming a funder. So we're this crazy mix of, we have some program development expertise, we have metrics evaluation expertise, we have fundraising expertise, and we have money. So when we partner with an organization, like we're doing in Dartmouth or in Winnipeg, we come to the table with significant dollars to say, let's build this community food center with you. So we bring some IP, intellectual property, as it were, with an organization on the ground that has trusting relationships, has done some food stuff, is philosophically thinking about solidarity, not charity. Obviously, there needs to be need. And we marry together, and we create this $500,000 bundle, which is the start. And the reason why $500,000 is my gray hair is in part directly attributable to those early years at the start. At least I have been. But it was really hard. And once we got to 5 staff working across kind of dignified access, community kind of skill building around kitchens and gardens, and then civic engagement and education, those 3, once we had a critical mass of staff, we started to see the ship sail a bit. So we're trying to give a bit of like, instead of that 3-4 years of like tough slogging it out, you know, so many organizations have 1 staff. You know, it's really hard. So we're just trying to give a bit of an injection, so let's go. So that's where we come up with that number. So, you know, we're hoping in part, humbly, to be part of the funding infrastructure to support organizations to build and grow these centers. But there is no simple answer to the funding, you know, and I think in the corporate space it's really complicated. There are many cow pies to step in, because there are lots of companies that are trying to wash themselves clean. And, you know, whose side are you on? And as my dad always said, you know, the other side is trying too, so you have to be really careful about who your values and who you align with. And sometimes when you're desperate, you make desperate decisions, and we're hoping to find a number of organizations to save them from those desperate decisions and just build something that really is value-driven and different. But we'll talk fundraising another time. I'll track you down, because it's a tricky one.
Is there anyone else in the crowd who would like Drew to find them?
This is largely related to that last question I was asked.
It's a common theme.
Yeah, sort of public versus private. But this is sort of related to what you said about becoming a food fighter on the public realm, and this idea of food citizenship. So, do you think that we can get to a point in which food systems are controlled more by the public realm than private corporate interests? And what would that look like?
Well, I do. I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing if I didn't feel that that were possible. And I've been really, quite frankly, concerned about the kind of vote with your fork stuff that has garnered so much attention. And rightly so. I'm not suggesting that, you know, the more people who shop sustainably and touch the farmer is the new rock star. Everyone wants to touch the farmer. I say the farmer has to get back to the field to grow. Like, it's complicated. So, you know, there's no question that, are you a farmer? Oh yeah. So I don't know how you got out tonight, but congratulations. But I have been concerned about it, because it is largely something that's led by the wall. And if we agree that sustainable food is the best thing for our planet and our bodies, then we need to start thinking about food from a public perspective, or a food citizenship perspective. And it means that those people who come to the farmer's market at the stop, and there are 1,000 who come through there every Saturday, $3 million worth of food. We're often the biggest customer, or the people we've kind of curated that farmer's market. It's really important to those farmers. But we want those folks who are plunking their money down on that good food. That's the real cost of food. Okay? We spend 10 cents at every dollar on food in this country, which is ridiculous. You know, in France, other places, it's 17, 18%. We have really crushed the farmer in getting our prices down. And everyone benefits from the farmer. But we do need those folks at the farmer's market to be saying, wow, 3 kilometers down the road at the stop's other site, there are 16,000 people who are having trouble putting food on their table. Any food. So when we launch a campaign to increase social assistance rates, 50% of people who use food banks are on social assistance. Our rates are woefully inadequate. We need to have those folks who come from the nice addresses on Alsina and Tyrrell to be fighting lockstep with our community members on Lawton around increasing social assistance rates, because you better believe that 50 letters from Alsina go a lot further than 50 letters from Lawton in the Stop Low Income neighborhood. So how do you build those bridges where class do interact with each other and start to say, we're all in this together? And, you know, again, my sense is as these problems grow, and I'm not a catastrophizer, right? I don't want to say, oh, wait, you know, climate change is real. But as these problems grow in velocity, and we start to maybe look at some of the storms we're having, these are things that, from a public perspective, we're going to have to grapple with very significantly, because the costs to NOD, as Brendan has said, are enormous. Enormous pressure on the public purse. So what will change that? I don't know. I just think that if you continue to fight for things you believe in, and do it well, and try and get a kind of a big tent approach, that there are others who are with you in that fight who are unusual suspects. Like, you don't want to always be talking to the same dude. Because you talk to the same dude, you're all like, yeah, I agree, but you're not going to change. So you have to find unusual suspects in that journey who will bring you into different kinds of corridors and have different kinds of conversations. But I often find I don't know how to leave it other than saying you just have to be, I use tenacious, relentless. Like if you believe in something, you fight for it hard, and you build a case that it's too important to ignore. And on the food file, there are many of those issues. And I think as food citizenship is growing, in my view, and the kinds of centers we're trying to develop are places where different kinds of conversations happen. And it's not about transaction, it's about building relationships. You know, the food bank is a transaction. You get to the front of the line, you get your food, and you go home. And we need to be creating places where relationships are built. And relationships with unusual suspects is really important, with those who are most affected at the front of the line, talking about how their lives are affected and what needs to change. So we just gotta keep fighting.
And there's never a place where you can't have those conversations, right? I think people think there's a time and a place for them, but dinner parties, coffee shops, here, we all have to say it all the time.
There are some times where you just let it pass. Because that father-in-law, no, my father-in-law was great. I'm not saying that at all, but you know, sometimes you gotta let it pass. But you're right. I think the conversation is always there to be had. And I hope what the book does is that it's hard when you hear stories, and the book is made up of stories, people's stories and their challenges, that it's hard to argue ideologically against people's stories. Like someone like Mary, who I described in my talk, like how can you call her lazy, or a poor budget, or that, you know, her poverty is a character flaw? There is no way in hell you can do that. And she has worked hard all her life. And she slipped and fell, had an accident at work, and couldn't get workers' comp. The last resort of social assistance, and we've already talked about how inadequate those rates are. So, you know, if you surface those stories, and I think the STOP and other organizations do a good job of this, is letting those stories surface. And the trick is to move beyond the individual to, like, what public policy stuff needs to change. It's all, in my view, about public policy. We need to be animating different kinds of conversations.
Maybe if there's maybe one more, I don't know, what time are we at? One more, Dan in the back, 1, 2, okay.
It's 10:03. One more question, yep.
Hi there. Hey, Brendan. Hi, it's Maritza. I'm Maritza Robertson, nutritionist with Health Insights. And I just wanted to say this is a great conversation, especially coming from Trinidad as an immigrant. And I wanted to bring up a couple of things.
Did you bring doubles? Did you bring any doubles?
No, I didn't. Actually, if I could find some,
my favorite
it'd be amazing. And by the way, I will say to you that Callaloo is a Trinidadian steak.
I love it. I know you say that. Well, you can have a fight with her.
I know.
I don't want to get between a Trini and a Jamaican.
Thank you very much. You get it, exactly. But what I wanted to say, first of all, I wanted to say, just give a brief background of where I'm coming from. I've been a long time volunteer with the Guelph Food Bank since '92, and I was drawn to it because of my experiences here as an immigrant. And coming from a country where there's serious poverty and frustration at the fact that the government is not willing to acknowledge it from the country I come from. And also to add to that, the Guelph Food Bank here is doing a lot of what you have described, which is what excites me a lot, for being part of it and being involved in that. But I think also what we need to take into consideration as an immigrant coming here, it's not just only stigmatization with food. It's also when you come into a country like this, there's a lot of messages saying that you are not adequate enough. So how do we bridge that psychological perspective that comes at you from a very strong environment? It's all around you, messages that are saying, you know what, yes, you may be skilled in your country, but when you come here, we don't consider you as per se more like a second citizen. So when you talk about food, or we talk about the fact that, let's say you're married, we're not just dealing with the fact that this person is coming because they're not able to access. It's also the sociological environment that most immigrants are exposed to, and they have to deal with that and climb that mountain through that. And the downfall of that is the fact that economically they're challenged because of that. So I just wanted to bring that up and just maybe you could comment on it. But again, as I said, I'm excited that I'm part of something, as a Guelph food bank. It's very different from what you're describing with food banks, because they're doing a lot of what you're describing here with what you've done in Toronto with the CFCC. And I'm excited to be part of that, because for me, I've always been socially minded in making change. And just to add to that, I do bring my trimminess to the food bank, and I've created quite a community with a lot of clients there.
Awesome. There you go.
Thank you.
Well, just quickly on the food bank front, good for you to be doing the work you do there. And I tread very carefully on the food bank stuff because, if there's an established big food bank, I think there are two things that separate good food banks from not so good food banks. The first is a real focus on healthy food. And it is very hard for food banks to bite the hand that feeds them. And the hands that feed food banks are big corporations. And basically it's fat, sugar, and salt. It's what big corporations produce. And the poor become the carburetors of that crappy food. Like, I'm serious. Like, it is the dredge lands there. And so, I don't know what Guelph is, how it looks, but we need to have more food banks stand up and say to Kraft, to Unilever, whatever the company, I'm not going to throw too many companies under the bus here. You need to say it's not acceptable. That is a health crisis on a plate. We cannot give this food out, and we need to have more of that in our sector. The other thing the food banks should do is that they spend so much energy moving food off a truck into a hamper program that they forget about the political side of why they started. Food banks 15 years ago, I'd meet with leaders that have been doing this work for a long time. They all talked about how food banks, there's no need, food banks need to end. Very rarely do you find food bank leadership talk in those terms. Now it's like, they're a part of the landscape. They're going to be with us forever. And there's not a fiber in my being that agrees with that statement. So you always have to carve out space to do the political, even though you're meeting the need, right? And it's significant need, I get that. So healthy food, fight back. I absolutely around, I hope you heard in the comments about East African men, for example. We have this unbelievable Hispanic cooking group at Stop. If public health saw the number of people in that friggin' kitchen, when that thing is on, we'd be shut down. Like, there are 50 people in there, cooking and talking and childcare. Like, it is beautiful. And ostensibly, people are there for the food. That's one part of this beautiful thing that happens. And so, I believe food and it imbued with culture, I tell a story about how I met my wife over the artichoke. I love the artichoke. I love any food that you have to work hard at to get to. You prick your hand a few times, you gotta boil it forever, and then when you make the lemon and the butter sauce and you add a pinch of salt and you carve out that part, it's just like magic when you eat it. But I love the artichoke because I wooed my wife over the artichoke. Food is never just food. And so I find that with immigrant communities, they haven't lost that part of their DNA where food, us Anglos, oh my gosh, we're so divorced from our food. We're reclaiming it, that's great. But immigrant communities are so rich with that food, those food pathways and that food culture. And I think a lot of our best programs at the Stop and in other cities where we're building these, it's those cultural opportunities around food that are so rich, and we need to mine those all the time to create comfort. That people are valued, heard, and stable in this community, but also to bring back memory and pleasure. Like, food is about connection, and commensality is about joy and pleasure, and we sometimes forget that when we're working in spaces that are cramped and dim-lit and with very marginalized folks. We've got to create those moments of beauty through food. I don't want to romanticize that, but it's important to be thinking along those lines all the time.
Go ahead, romanticize it. That's it, right? Let it rip, yes. Okay, why don't we, this is awesome, why don't we all go into the marketplace, have a bite to eat, get some drinks.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Okay, so it's really important. I have a sign-up sheet, for an e-newsletter from Community Food Centers Canada. Twitter is @a place for food, I have to say this, sorry. And the website is www.cfccanada.ca. But if you want to get any stuff from us, there's something to sign in there. Please sign and we'll add you to the list.
That's okay. I was about to ask people for a donation. You stepped all over it. But that's all right.
Make a donation.
But hold on. Kathy's a very smart farmer, so she'll come at you. All right, Kathy. Let's have one more for Kathy Hansen.
Nick, I agree wholeheartedly. Minimum wage is a shame, it's a sham. The social assistance comes nowhere near to meeting people's needs. I don't understand how a government organization with bright people that set policy can't figure out the price of groceries.
Well, you know what they can, Kathy? There's this thing called the nutritious food basket, the food basket costing. We have the data. All public health units across the province do it. In fact, across the country. That data goes up to the Ministry of Community Social Services, and they do nothing with it. Yeah, sorry, Jim.
So how we deal with this on a political level is a shame. So we're out there to fight, and I agree each of us needs to fight. But I'm thinking about this beautiful community food center concept. What if we get those things under control? If poverty starts to diminish, if over time we're actually getting people the food that they need, the money they need to participate with dignity in the food system. What does this beautiful community food center look like 20 years down the road?
I love this.
How does it change the food system? How does it get us out of the trap we're currently in at the hands of the big
But you know the answer. I mean,
I want to know how beautiful it is for a city the size of Guelph, a nice, modest-sized city.
Well,
What's it going to look like?
well, first of all, you'd have a center without a food bank. Because that's the first thing that would have to go. We want to jettison that emergency part of it. But, and I commented on this a bit in remarks about the importance of public space. We are losing our public spaces. Our world is increasingly privatized. And we need those places, like a dining room, where people can come out and eat together. I don't care how much income you have. You need to find places. We are social beings. You know Margaret Thatcher's famous line? Is that there's no such thing as society, we're only individuals? Oh my Lord, I want nothing to do with that. We are social beings. We are all connected. And we need spaces where people can come together to tell their stories, feel valued, respected, validated, however you want to put it. So, it would be a center where people would be able to connect over whatever issues are affecting their community. It would be a place that purchased with its values and supported a whole local food economy. It would be a place that spawned campaigns, because I don't think Kathy's going to happen as fast as it would be great. I don't want to just say, oh, it's going to be done in 20 years, but the fight will still be on, and we'll be saying, like my son walks into a hospital, he goes, Dad, why do they have deep fried chicken wings and fish and the Coke machine when this is supposed to be a center of health? My 9-year-old son gets it. So, we're going to have those conversations so that our tax dollars, the billions of tax dollars that are being spent on the wrong kind of food economy, are spent on the kind of economy that you're fighting for, the kind of the tree is fighting for, that Brendan and Gavin and all of this lovely farmer here, who should be on his farm, his tail out. So there are going to be these spaces where we come together around good food, and we're working on those issues that are having a negative effect on us, and also having pleasure and connection. That's a pretty good dream. That's worth fighting for. All right, good. Let's go.
All right, so the answer today is we all fight. Don't accept the reality we have. Do whatever you can to be part of change. I think we all have a voice, and we can all do that. So that's what I'm asking everyone to come out of tonight doing. So come to the marketplace. We're going to go food, drink, talk to Nick, come offer large amounts of money to the Guelph Neighborhood Sport Coalition. So we can do the amazing work we do.
Is there alcohol? No.
I can run out of that stuff. But come in there, let's talk. Nick's book's there. Buy it. It's inspiring. It'll change your life. And then we'll make a big field trip to the Green Barn one day and see the space he's talking about and see how change happens. Or Stratford, yeah, even closer. We'll do a whole bus tour. We'll all go and see these spaces, go to Black Creek in Toronto, and see these amazing places and see what we can do here. So let's go. Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.